Philosophical angle, defining concepts in current media. And I am your host, Chris Angle. I'm the author of 4 books on philosophy, one of which is The Philosophical Equations of Economics. The purpose of the philosophical angle is to examine the nature of concepts being used in current media and compare the essence of the concept with the usage and circumstances in which the terms are being used. This week, we're going to discuss a statement made by President Obama regarding that governments should be smart. Well, let's get started. Some time ago, a few weeks ago, President Obama made a statement about government should be smart. Well, I don't know what smart means, but perhaps it means quick, adaptive, fast responding, more intelligent, wise, perhaps all of these. But we have to ask ourselves, what made it dumb? Or is it dumb? If it's going to be smart, is it not smart now? And what has it been for the last couple hundred years? Was it always like this? Was it always failing? And besides, why make it smart? And why not smart already? Government takes in what? What's the budget? $3 trillion a year? Certainly not money that has made it not smart. The government budget keeps growing. You would think that it would become somehow smarter for all the money that it's given. So we must conclude here that it's not smartness that comes from having a large amount of money to deal with every year. Obviously, there's no correlation between money and government smartness. In fact, the very statement that President Obama would like to make the government smarter, the inference is that it's failing now. And it's certainly not as good as a private corporation, for example, Apple or Microsoft and GE and United Technologies and all the great companies that America has that do so well and make a profit and bring so many great things to the market that people buy, and they buy because it makes their lives good. It brings them up away from misery. It helps their lives. It produces so many great things. So, why is it? Why isn't the government smart? And we look at the polls. Oh my gosh, they keep plummeting. Congress's poll numbers are dismal. Was it 15%? Less? I don't know. Something like that. President Obama's polls are going down. Popularity. The government as a whole is, well, it is, as President Obama has stated, it's failing. It's not smart, and it's failing. But some government services are okay. They do a pretty good job. Those listed in the Constitution that are responsibilities of the government, those responsibilities they have done not a bad job of, and let's grade a couple of them. The post office, noted right into the Constitution. Well, they deliver the letters. They do a pretty good job. Can't complain too much. I mean, people complain about it, but they do a pretty good job overall. I'd give them a B-. How about a protection of property rights? You own a home, you buy a home that's listed at the local government's office where it's listed and the property rights are noted there and protected by the courts and protected by the laws of the United States. So contract rights are well upheld in the courts for the most part. And thus the government does a pretty good job with protection of property rights. And that's a great influence and to bring capital from abroad here, because people know that their money is protected, that what is theirs remains theirs, and no one comes and takes it away. So I give the protection of property rights here in the United States an A-. There are a couple of instances, some instances where the government comes and confiscates things under certain laws of crime and certain eminent domain, and but overall, pretty great job, A-. Defense. When we're in a war, the Defense Department does a pretty good job. And historically, who can complain? Look at the troops, how well they've done in our conflicts over the last many years. They do a great job. They get an A. But in preventing wars, I'm not so sure we can give them an A. They didn't prevent 9/11. They didn't prevent Pearl Harbor from happening. So, on anticipating conflicts, they don't do such a great job. It's only after the conflict happens and we get involved, then the Department of Defense and the government itself does a great job. So now we have to go ask, why isn't the government smart in the first place? It seems like it was smart during the 1800s. We don't hear complaints so much about government then, but particularly in the last 100 years, this worry has come to surface. So we have to ask ourselves why, and let's analyze the situation here. We've noted that private companies do well. They're smart. Look at all the products that they produce. But government doesn't do so well. So what's the difference? Let's see. Under a private company, we have stockholders. In the government, we have the people, the citizens of the United States. Under a private company, after stockholders initiate a company, they form the corporation. We formed a union. And after you form a corporation has its bylaws. After forming the union, we have the Constitution. After the bylaws, a board of directors are nominated. Equivalent to that on the government side would be Congress and the president and the judicial branch. After the board of governors or board of directors, they nominate and hire the officers of the company to run the company. Congress, we have after the government is established, we have the executive branch execute the laws and run the government. The officers in a private corporation, they hire the employees, which do the work. And of course, the government also hires government workers to do the work of the government. Equivalent. And the employees produce all the products and services. The government workers, of course, do the product and services that the government is to provide. So far we've really not found any place where there's an anomaly that would allow us to conclude that the government inherently just can't be smart. So let's dig a little further. the methodology of life's decisions. Let's decide, let's go and explore how we make decisions. And these decisions are by life, and so which inhabited both private companies and government. So the methodology of life's decisions is that an individual will establish a priority, and that's a piece of knowledge. And he establishes a priority to do that which is good for his life. He wants to survive. He wants to be comfortable. He needs food. The person needs rest and medicine and health. And so he makes a sacrifice. He makes a priority that these things are important in his life. And so then he starts to execute them according to the hierarchy of priorities. He wants to stay alive, right there at the top. Then after that, he needs food. So he makes sacrifices so that he can have food, and he makes sacrifices so that he can rest at night. And so the individual makes a sacrifice so that he produces enough so that he has medicine and we can have health for the family. And our priorities are to obtain these things. And the priority allows us to go out and make a sacrifice to obtain a reward. And these rewards we perceive as good for us, as we already have delineated here. And this reward of goodness is a product or a service that we bring into our lives, that brings us up away from misery and produces a life that we seek. In a corporation, they'll have a research and development side to the corporation. That is, people will think about what good products and services we can make, because we know that there's a demand for this stuff, because people want to have a good life. And so the corporation will situate their products and services into the priorities of the constituents of society. So, say the research and development side of the corporation will decide that X is good, and X is a good or a service. And thus, this is established as a piece of knowledge within the corporation and becomes a priority to produce that good or service that it perceives will be in demand by society. For example, an MRI machine. Obviously a great thing, because it allows for your doctor to perceive what is wrong with you, and so that it helps you lead a healthy life if something goes wrong. So the corporation, let's say it decides that it invents an MRI, and decides that this is a good thing, and it is, obviously, and starts to manufacture it. And when it starts to manufacture it, that's equivalent to the sacrifice that individuals make. Oh, here it is. And the reward is when they sell it to a hospital and they get payment for it. And that goes into their profit and allows them to develop other things. And this is good. So the products and services are good because they bring a purpose into the demand of the constituents of society. If the product is faulty, society doesn't buy it, because they want something that's going to make their life good and even better than what it is now. They're always searching for something that's going to make life better for you. So we still haven't come by an answer to our question of why the government is not smart. So we need to research it a little bit further. As we know, government has a Congress. And behind the government are the voters that elect the Congress. And Congress will establish a priority, just as the corporation did over there. And they'll establish our priority. Let's say it's establish a good defense, to have aircraft carriers or defense programs and send jet fighters and to hire postal workers and judges. And obviously these things are good because they've done a pretty good job. We gave them a good rating. Back here we gave them a good rating. So they're producing a good product. And we know that because the Department of Defense buys the contract, buys the jet fighters and all the other products that the private enterprise puts out. But it's a good symbiosis. They have a priority for a need for this to protect the United States, enlist the private corporations to go out and make products that fulfill that demand. Okay, good job. However, there are another set of products that we should discuss, such as farm supports, welfare, entitlements. And how does this come? Are these good for America? Did we all vote on these? Is it clear that it benefits all of America? Well, perhaps not. Farm supports are actually made for the farmers and benefit the farmers. Welfare benefits those just who receive welfare and not the entire constituents. Which is different from when we go over here and we go back to the comparison of the private company. Everything at the product and services once sold produces a profit, and from that profit a dividend that you can put back into the stockholders, and it benefits all the stockholders equally compared to how much they invested in the company. In this case, it doesn't come back to the voters or the constituents of the government in equal fashion. It supports or is it's beneficial. Portion is apportioned amongst certain constituents and not all the constituents. And this comes from some of the voters get part of their constituents to have an influence that a certain product or service is good, and when part of the constituents create a priority within Congress that supplies a beneficial product or service to a certain group and not the entire group, you have the beginnings of the inefficiencies of the government. Because not all of the voters or constituents of the government are receiving the assets being supplied by the government, actually being supplied by the government's constituents, the voters, through taxation, and thus an inequality pops up within the voters. Well, part of the constituents get free money, and this as a secondary, there's a secondary deleterious effect on incentive, which lowers the overall productivity of the U.S. So not only is it that some receive more than others, but the effect on incentive is a secondary result causing further inefficiencies, leading us away from smart government to a dumb government, to a failing government that we have discussed here. So, the more that we get away from the constituents and the voters producing part of an influence on part of the constituency, the more we have the influence on part of the constituents, it produces a greater amount of inefficiency through the two operations that we just discussed. So the option is that we adhere to constitutional government. It was smart until this operation started to take off. And as it grows, the incentives go down and the efficiency of the government goes down, increasing the propensity for failure in the government. So, the best way is to make it small and adhere to the constitutional mandates within the government, such as no entitlements, only help for all, not for certain segments of society. And this is really the meaning of the general welfare clause of the Constitution, that Congress shall make laws for the general welfare, not for specific welfare. And if we adhere to this, to the Constitution, then we'll get a smarter government that's more efficient, whereby the sacrifice of the government and behind the government, the voters and the taxpayers will get a more fair reward for those things that we expect of the government. And that's my little speech on making government smarter. So thank you for joining us, and see you next time.